Well, thank you, Ron, and thank you all for inviting me here. Again, I'm Ryan Rowe. I'm the Director of Faith Outreach for the Coalition to Protect All North Carolina Families. We're very welcomed and affirmed in a space like this. A little more sense of home, knowing your pastor and having connections to my hometown in Detroit, and also knowing this is open to the community and community members that have come out to find out what they can do to defeat Amendment 1 are near and dear to my heart. So I feel very blessed to be here and want to do my best to serve you and your calling to be informed and to know what you can do with Amendment 1. As was read in my bio, I am a United Methodist preacher's kid. So forgive me for that.
You got two preacher's kids.
That's right.
Scary.
And I am from Detroit. And I look at this list of milestones in the UCC church, and I see an inspiration. And I've worked with the National Open and Affirming Movement, and every time we get together as denominations who are working to transform our world within the institutions that, as Roland said, have the loudest voice and sometimes can do the most damage, that being our religious institutions. We one time had a training where we put all of the national leaders of open and affirming movements, Troy Plummer is our national president of Reconciling United Methodists, and others, and had them on a wall and just said, you know, go to your place on this continuum from silence and intolerance to advocacy, and those leaders. And if we said, you know, where do you stand on membership, or where do you stand on ordination, or where do you stand on marriage? And it was always our UCC brothers and sisters who were down here leading the way. So thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, our brother Troy had to stand somewhere near the exit, and it really demonstrated. Now, we had some affirming Baptists that were cheating, and they stayed in the middle there. So the Methodists had to like really represent for this denominations that are coming from behind on this. A story that reminds me of is in the work that we do here in North Carolina. We had a resolution on the floor of the North Carolina General meeting for United Methodists, and basically it was a test, and it said, we stand as United Methodists and as Christians against the use of the Bible to condone violence against LGBT people. We stand against things like the Kill the Gays legislation in Uganda. We stand against hate crimes that have used Bible passages as justification. We stand firmly and unified on this baseline that we first do no harm, as John Wesley is known to say. And we said, you know, this will be a test. Either someone will see who sponsored this bill and automatically vote against it, or they will finally listen to something that at least is a starting point for a conversation. And when we get so divided into red states and blue states, and certainly with this amendment, we get so divided that the minute we hear what it's about, we know how we're gonna vote. And I stood on that floor and I said, as a sponsor of this bill, I'd like to cast a vision out of all of the bitter and difficult conversations we've had on this floor. What would it be like for us to stay unified today and have something we can all agree on when it comes to this very difficult issue in our church? Literally, United Methodist Church, when we take votes like this, are split down the middle. And we need a 2/3 majority to change basic principles in our denomination, and so they barely fail almost every year. So it's been a long, hard road. And again, we thank you for your example. And it passed. It passed because there are a lot of people who are hungry to not let any issue prevent them from seeing Christ in another person, to disconnect themselves so much from their neighbors that they lose the core principle and motivation for being a person of faith in the first place, and that is to love your neighbor, to love each other as God has loved you? And what does it mean that any issue would take you to the brink of disagreement where you stop seeing that in one another? And that hunger that day was more powerful than any position that anyone had taken. And I think about that every day that I work on this issue, because I think about that with Amendment 1. You do not have to have a position, and this will be sort of a review session for people who've been coming out to these talks. But essentially, I hope you know by now that you do not have to be affirming of same-sex marriage to be against Amendment 1. What you have to be against is harming children and families and enshrining that into the Constitution of North Carolina. And so we really are out here appealing to all of our neighbors to really do no harm. That's what Amendment 1 is about. And as I stand in open and affirming spaces, and what I come here today to do is to tell you what you can do, and also, if you haven't picked it up yet, talk about ways that we talk about this with each other and this broader vision of marriage equality, but also ways that we can meet our neighbors where they're at and talk to them in a way that doesn't get into the requirement of changing an entire paradigm and worldview around this issue, in order to just be clear that I trust that you don't want to harm children and families in North Carolina. And if you knew what this was about, and that is pretty much the most consistent thing, and I think you probably already witnessed this, that when you sit down with someone who is adamantly opposed to you and for Amendment 1, and they take the time to really listen to you, and you tell them about the harms that this would cause, very rarely have I ever seen anyone not come a long way, if not, decide to either not vote or vote against Amendment 1. And so I hope that in the series that you've been coming to, you feel more equipped and more informed about how to have those conversations. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the different ways that we have in all of our offices and our statewide network of congregations, ways to, again, equip you in your call to do something, to put your faith into action. And because it's really something that I consider a ministry to us all, that, again, faith without works is dead, that there's a relationship that we have with God that requires our own stretching beyond our comfort zones and the embodiment of our values, not just talking about those values, but how does it grow us as people of faith, or for people who aren't people of faith, how does it grow you as a person in just whatever your core values are? What is the psychological violence to anyone that has a core belief and doesn't live that belief out? And at the end of the day, most of our civil rights struggles are really come down to that, right? Loving your neighbor enough to say you believe this and you do this. The Constitution of the United States says this, and yet we do this. Our core tenets as people of faith are this, and yet I see you doing this. I see you harming people in our community. And so it is really an act of love. I go with the definition of M. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. I love that book because the very first sentence is, life is difficult, period. And he pretty much puts it out there, you're going to suffer. You can't get out of that part. The question for you is your suffering meaningful or meaningless? Has the suffering you've gone through in life somehow shaped you to have the ability to affect change, to love other people, to have a story that someone needs to hear, and gifts that someone needs, right? So the definition of love is extending oneself in the service of the spiritual path of another. And I think about that definition because we extend ourselves every day for the cause of justice. And I have to believe that that's an act of love that grows us into the people we're called to be. And that's more than telling people, it's not a love that just tells people nice things, right? Because love gets sold out all the time, right? Oh, that soft love, you're talking about love, we want to win, this is a fight, this is a war. And I think more so than any, people of faith are able to show that third way, that example, that love is the most powerful way, and it does allow us to challenge one another to live according to our own values. Even when we disagree, there are base values that I trust we can all agree on. So that's what I came here to talk to you about. And I won't quiz you, but I do want to do a little bit of review, and that is, what does Amendment 1 say, and what doesn't it say? What does it do and not do? How will it harm the children and family of North Carolina? And then, yes, what have we been doing, and what do we need to do for the next 41 days that we have before our May 8th election? So let's review. Amendment 1 has two phrases. The one everyone is stuck on, the first part, says marriage between one man and one woman. And the key part that no one's reading or paying attention to is domestic legal union. It shall be the only domestic legal union recognized in this state. And that is the kicker, right? That's what we've been learning in this series, that if we narrow the definition of what is a legally recognized domestic union, 222,000 people that fall under that category of not being a married man and woman, but are an unmarried couple, a domestic union. 222,000 people, according to the 2010 census here in North Carolina, will have their rights restricted. They will have every municipal employee that currently receives domestic partnership benefits, and there's about seven of them, will automatically have those domestic partnership benefits threatened, right? Real harms will happen to the children of those families. The critical medicine that's needed, the health care benefits, everything that makes life hard in this state will become harder for all of those city employees. And by far, most of them are straight people. Out of the 222,000 people who fall under the unmarried couple category in this state, only 22,000 of them are gay and lesbian. And if you think about that, out of those 22,000, how many of them are going to actually come out of the closet and apply for partnership benefits? It's much lower. So, and we're talking about who's actually receiving these benefits. When we had an amendment that was aimed at discriminating against a minority and a marginalized group in the state, that's sort of a universal principle, right? That usually backfires. And so this unintended consequence now ripples throughout the state of North Carolina and does immense damage, some of which we don't even really know, right? We don't know how our courts are going to test the language that no one has ever used in this state, domestic legal union. We don't know whether, like Ohio, it would mean that 27 domestic violence cases are overturned because they weren't they abused a partner that they were not married to. We don't know if, like my sister and her wife, the state of Michigan passes something like this and has a clause like this one, that it will not affect private contracts, to convince businesses that their domestic partnership benefits that they provide to be competitive in this market, and their discrimination policies that they have to not discriminate against gay and lesbian families will not be threatened. That after that passed, that immediately was threatened and used as a precedent to go after domestic partnership benefits. And my sister and her wife are dealing with that right now. So there's a laundry list of a Pandora's box that this opens. But there are concrete harms that we know this will have. And there are speculation from another side about activist judges taking away the fact that it's already illegal in North Carolina for gay and lesbian people to be married, right? Mm-hmm. No one is threatening that, no one sued, no one has ever attempted to threaten that law. And yet that's the primary motivation for this, that we need more than a law, we need a constitutional amendment to protect us from activist judges. So there's speculation, and then there's very real families that I'm sure you've all seen, and we'll be trying to share more of those stories as we go forward. Children, unmarried couples, victims of domestic violence, these are all real people. And I think, fortunately, for the long, hard road to marriage equality in North Carolina, we don't really need to get out these scriptures. We need to simply talk about the scriptures that call us to do no harm, to love your neighbor, to the other 99% of the Bible that gives us some clear mandates about this base moral value of not harming people, right? And our call to protect the innocent and the marginalized and the most vulnerable and the least of these in our community, end quote. And so I really think, as the Methodist Church, at least on that one crazy day, we have an opportunity in North Carolina to be unified on this issue and start a dialogue towards winning more justice in our state. I think that you can't talk about Amendment 1 without talking about it in context from a lot of regressive policy making that's been happening in our state. We have the most ultra-conservative legislature that we've ever had in North Carolina, and you can't really look at Amendment 1 without talking about the repeal of the Racial Justice Act. You can't look at the sponsors of this bill who at one point, one of the sponsors actually sponsors the overturning of the Voting Rights Act, the redistricting that we've seen and stacking all of our black voters into one district so that even if 90% of the black people in North Carolina came out to vote, they would still have less of an impact than they did when they had the previous districts. There's a laundry list of things that the same people are sponsoring to take a playbook that's really old, which is to bring out people who are motivated by one issue, and that is gay marriage, as they would call it, and get as many voters out to continue to use gay and lesbian families as a chip to win elections and to disenfranchise people in this state and secure the position that they've just won doesn't go away in the next election. And I can't be honest and have my integrity without being honest with you that I see no way of separating those two. Now the flip side of that is we had a big election in 2008, and there was a shift and a narrow win and some directions in this state that people were very hopeful for. Many of those same people did not come out to vote in the midterm election, and the state went in a very different direction. So the question is, what direction does this state want to go in? And if the direction is more along the lines of what happened in 2008, then those voters or non-voters have to see sometimes how bad it can get when we don't vote. And so when I talk to you tonight about what you can do, I want to put this in very stark terms. We have to get out the vote. We have to make sure that people know that if you want to put your faith into action, you need to vote and you need to get 10 of your friends to the polls. Because the fact of the matter is, we are here in this position fighting, having a governor that's used the veto pen more than any other governor to defend against these attacks on the poorest, most marginalized people in our state because people didn't vote. And so I think we need to realize that things could get worse, or this could be the moment where people wake up and say, the direction I wanted my state to go in is not going to get there unless I realize, just like in the Wake County School Board election, who votes in the school board election? I didn't. Will I vote in every school board election from now until I die? You bet I will. Right? You have to have that wake-up moment. Amendment 1 could be the wake-up moment that not only defends gay and lesbian people against this attack, but turns the tide in this state for people to be engaged and take the state in the direction they want it to go. Am I telling you what direction you should go? No. I'm telling you, if only 12% of the people of North Carolina show up to vote, how do we know that's the direction? And when we have low turnouts, these things happen. So at the end of the day, if you want to defeat Amendment 1, you have to make sure that this area, a pretty progressive area where you see a lot of our signs, doesn't just have the people who were going to vote anyway come to the polls. It means that each one of you have to do everything you can to touch as many voters who say they're against this, but will probably not vote. Will probably not check to make sure that they're registered from the last place they moved. Will probably not look into absentee ballots or whatever they need to do. Will probably not take the time off of work or find the early voting sites. And you need to call and remind them why it's critical that they not stay home. That's the only thing I've really come here to tell you. That we can have signs, and they're important. They start conversations. Each one of you, I know, has called all your family and friends and told them. We can have, Rollin give the next I Have a Dream speech, right? We can have a $5 billion advertising budget. We can change the opinion polls in this state so everyone is against it. And we can still lose this election because people don't vote. Or they might not vote unless you remind them why it's important. And so what we show in campaign science that's pretty tested and proven in elections like the Wake County School Board election is that it takes 3 to 5 what we call touches. And some of you in this room know what I'm talking about. You have to call that person more than once. You have to knock on their door. You have to put something in the mail. Yes, they'll see a sign, they'll see an advertisement. But 3 to 5 times they need to be reminded, you said you were against this, and you need to vote. So you have offices in this all over the triangle. You have a dedicated faith field organizer. His name is Adam Limehouse. You have a person here at this congregation that's connected to Adam. His name's Tom. He's waving his hand right now. And that is your way of getting involved. What we're going to do for the next 40 days is we're going to phone bank. How many of you have ever done a phone bank? Awesome. And that's the way, now, these quality conversations we want to have, ideally we would knock on everyone's door. Do we have the time, money, or capacity to do that? No. So the next best thing is calling people. Who are you calling? You're not calling someone to have an argument. You're calling someone who probably signed that pledge form that was held up that said, I want to vote against this. And you look them up and you see they haven't voted. During the early voting session, you can actually see that. But however it is, you are going to get a group of folks together and pledge how many times you want to come into the office or host something right here. And that's another thing that's in our packet that we have to do a lot of education about sometimes. This is a ballot referendum. It's not a candidate campaign. It's a nonpartisan issue. And so nonprofit congregations do not risk their nonprofit status by taking a clear stance against Amendment 1. So if anyone tells you we can't do that because we're a church or a synagogue, you need to educate them. It's a ballot referendum, not true. You can do a phone bank right here in this room, and your pastor, as probably already has, preached against this. So just to be clear, I know you guys may know that, but if for those of you that aren't connected to this congregation or those of you who are touching other community members, clarify that with people. But if there's one thing that we need is for all of our congregations. I was in Charlotte, and Charlotte's a big area, Mecklenburg County, and our faith field organizer there said we have 16 strong congregations that can do something. And if by average they only came in and did 5 phone bank shifts a week, and that's a 2-hour session, we train you up, we give you a list of people that want to vote against this, and you call them and remind them, make sure they have all the information. You know where your early voting site is, when do you plan to vote. You have a nice conversation based on a script and your own personal story. 2-hour session, if we did 5 of those shifts, just 5 a week, if a group here decided, hey, we're going to come into the Durham office, which is right next to Self-Help in downtown Durham, or we're going to host something here once a week, and all we need to do is have 5 people show up to that. If every congregation in Charlotte did that, they would have half of the calls that we need to make in order to win this. How do we know how much we need to win? Because we've already identified every voter that we need to win this. That's what the earlier portion is called voter ID. We call everybody up and say, are you voting against? Okay, great, we'll talk to you in a couple months. We have enough voters to win, now we need to get them to the polls. And so that's where we need your help. So the 2 asks that we're having of our congregations are, 1, that every congregation pledge to at least, and this is a larger congregation, you come up with your own number, to fill 5 phone bank shifts a week. And the second is that we want to have a faith voter rally every holy weekend of early voting. When does early voting start?
19th.
April 19th. And so there's 3 key weekends. You all in Durham, also very lucky, you have Sunday voting sites. So we'll also be encouraging all of our congregations that... Right, literally. If anyone ever heard of Souls to the Polls? You have now. And it basically is just that. We literally have congregations right after the sermon, right where you might pass the plate, the doors of the church open, the vans are warmed up, and you drive as a caravan, as a congregation, as an act of faith. And maybe you bring, the media comes out sometimes. They like to see that. And it lets other people know something's going on. I need to go out and vote. And so Sundays we'll be encouraging all of our congregations in the Durham area. We have some in Durham, in the Wake County, in Greensboro and Winston-Salem, and we're working on some others. So Sundays we will be doing Souls to the Polls. And on other days, on like Wednesday Bible study night or Saturday, we will have either a tent revival or in a congregation right next to the early voting site. We will have a faith event, and we will want you to come out, bring other people of faith, and walk over to the polls with them. So that'll be happening at least 3 times in the Durham area during April 19th. So phone banking, events. Those are our 2 key strategies. And just to put this in perspective, we have 7 offices across this state. There's a faith field organizer in each one of them. We have an average of 15 to 20 congregations. How many of you are tired of hearing in the media that people of faith are all for Amendment 1? Sick of it, right? That they're all intolerant, that they all believe in this punishment gospel, and they can't tolerate gay and lesbian families, even though we know for a fact that there are gay and lesbian people in every single church in this state. How many of you are tired of that? How many of you want to vision with me, what would it feel like to say that people of faith made the critical difference in defeating Amendment 1? How might that change the conversation about faith and politics in North Carolina for years to come? How might it make someone stop before they say politics doesn't belong in the pulpit? And we can then start to bring out the scripture that proves that Jesus was a community organizer. Right? You don't know my Jesus. He was a community organizer, I'm telling you. And so I want to cast that vision with you. I want to thank you for your witness. I want to thank you for your presence, because it is that act of faith, that embodying of your beliefs, that makes, in my tradition, Jesus come alive, makes the word become flesh. It makes everything we preach about on Sundays become a reality. And you have an opportunity to show that you did not stay home when God shaped you through all of these trials and tribulations into a person that had the ability to say, I'm a person of faith, and I'm against Amendment 1. God gave you the opportunity to do justice, and you took it. And that grows your relationship with God more so than any one campaign or any one election. And it is a gift to you if you take it. and it's a gift to others if you offer it to them. So at the end of the day, this isn't anything different than anything we've been talking about in church forever. This is a witness to love and the power of love and God's love and the ability to do justice, to actually do it, to live it out, and the gift that that has for your own soul. So I'll take some questions. I may have gone over time, but you know, down to the details, we're here to walk with you for the next 40 days to answer any question you have and make sure that you have everything you need to answer your call. Thank you.